We're going to take a look now at a two sample t-test. So very similar. We need to start by first writing the null and alternative hypothesis. And so in this case, we want to see if there is a, well, we haven't decided yet, right? But here's the scenario of test scores for two different groups, English-only speakers and those who speak a second or another language, right? And so you can see the notation for a null and alternative if we're measuring one, in one case, if there's a significant difference, right? Or in one case, if one is significantly lower, and then you can see the notation, how the notation changes. So you'll see that, of course, the null hypothesis is always an equal. The alternative, right, is your inequality notation. And then again, we write it as a difference representation. Okay, so you got to get, again, used to that language because that's how we do it in StatCrunch, right? So looking at the actual test, again, it has the 5 steps. There's your null and alternative. We're checking to see, is there a significant difference? So that will be a not equal sign. So two sample t-test, we're going to assume alpha 0.05, and then we have the sample data here. Okay, again, here is the initial data to check to see what gives us some evidence, right? Some clues about, could this be true? That is are they equal or are they different, right? And they could be from the sample. It looks different, but we'll see. We have to run the test. You check the conditions, right? IRL. We're not 100% sure, again, depends on what we're defining as the population. 5% of what, right? If it's of all students, then we're probably close, right? But again, it's a pretty big sample. But again, we're going to proceed forward. We're just not confident. We don't know if they're randomly selected. And then we know it's for sure large enough. That data is large enough to run. So, but again, in the real world, we have to always be conscious of the requirements and how that may influence the results. But we're going to run it. We're going to see we get a t-stat, very small t-stat, right? Negative. So when we compare the English only to another language, those who speak another language, we see a big difference potentially because of that t-stat, right? And then the p-value, right? How do we get that again? That's going to be we'll end up doing that in StatCrunch, stat, t-stat, two sample with summary. And then we go ahead and we're going to enter in those values, right? So you have the means for the two groups. So we're doing English only goes first. And so that's your 530. Standard deviation is 117, and then the sample size, again, a very big sample size. So that's going to give us a lot of potential evidence, right, that maybe there is a difference between them. It's such a big sample. The other one was 543, standard deviation 117, and then again, a very big sample size that we put in there. But again, thinking about the effects of sample size, something we mentioned before in other lectures around that. And we're checking to see no difference, so we'll use the not equal to. And again, notice that notation there. The difference between the two means we compile, and that's where we got the p-value, very small p-value, test statistic, very big, or negative, right? And so we then go ahead and proceed. Since the p-value is less than alpha, we reject the null hypothesis. We have significant evidence. We're rejecting that there is a difference between those scores. And that's it. Well, let's see if we can finish these t-tests, right? This is another t-test. This time the t-test, we would be, you have data in this case. And so we're checking to see, is there a difference between North America and Europe in terms of the number of COVID cases, and that was of July 15th, and we got the data from this website here. Now, we have the sample data in this case, so we're going to run the tests. Still, just make sure you know that sample data, right? We set it up here. We have the sample sizes so that we could check the IRLs. And so when we think about it, as we go through that, right, we're checking to see, is there a difference between them, So the mean of North America equals the mean of North America is not equal to the mean of Europe. And then, like I said, so we make sure we got those straight. And then IRL, the sample sizes, are they less than 5% of the population? It depends. There's 195 countries in the world, so it's not less than 5% of all the countries, because 10% of 200 is 20. Yeah, so it's close, but again, it gets us in that weird situation where we don't know if it was randomly selected, but it's large enough. And so we will conduct the test still, right? We just need to be cautious with our analysis and interpretations again, because we're not sure of all the requirements are being met. So we're going to get a t-stat and a p-value. I'm going to show you how to do that on StatCrunch. So you have the data. The data is in. If you have the Word doc or PDF, you can click on that to open up the data in StatCrunch. And so then we get the data. Let me show you the data. There it is here. And so in this case, when we do it, you're going to t-stats to sample with data in this case. And so we're comparing Europe. Is there a difference between Europe and North America, right? That's what we're comparing, our two groups, our samples. It's actually North America and Europe first, the way I wrote it. So technically, we would go the other way because of how I wrote it on there. We wouldn't change the results, but we're going to put it in the right order because it's the first group minus the second group. And that's it. That's what we got. We're running hypothesis not equal to, and then we run it like we done before, and then you get those values. So in this case, you end up with 2.79, negative 2.93, negative 2.94, right, as your t-stat. Negative 2.94, and the p-value is 0.00. As we finish this, what was the p-value? Again, the p-value is 0.0043. And again, we're going to use alpha. And since what do we know in this case? I'll fill this in. Hold on. So now that we calculated the t-stat and p-value using StatCrunch, we can then go ahead and make our conclusion. Right, since the p-value is less than alpha, we reject the null hypothesis. So this is what we're rejecting, and we're accepting this, that there is a difference between North America and Europe, and that's how we come with that conclusion. There is sufficient evidence to conclude that, right? And that's because we rejected the null hypothesis.